Hi everyone. So now that we have started class and you are all on your way to reading about design history, this is a short video to help you along a little bit and introduce you to your first project, which is called a collective design history, and it's a timeline. So you'll see that on the screen here. I have the PDF of the assignment for you. But what I wanted to do was to show you the actual setup of it, of the timeline, which I've already started in as a Google Doc. It's actually a Google form, so that you can get an idea of what you can do. And again, keep in mind that, like I say here, graphic design is history is very long and complicated, and there's all sorts of events that are intertwined to allow for what we call graphic design to emerge. And so there's a lot of people, there's a lot of events, there's a lot of histories, there's a lot of wars, there's a lot of complications. And in many ways, this history, it's also, you can sort of track it along with sort of like the history of art, for example. But like the history of art, again, it's also complicated, and there's other events and things that occur around the making of art, the making of design, that allow design to actually become what it is now and morph into different things. So we're doing this timeline collaboratively, meaning that we're all adding to it. So by the end of the first few weeks of class, what we will see is it's like making our own individual timeline. This is not a textbook timeline. This is a history based on what we are all interested in. So I'm really interested in your entries being ideas, moments, events that are of interest to you, including you adding your own birth or significant moment in design for you specifically as a designer. So as we get towards the end of the timeline, you will find places for you yourself to insert yourself into this collective history of design. That's very important. Anything that you want to add to this timeline is a go. That includes political, social, cultural events. You can include text, images, links, videos, items from classes discussion. You can footnote if you find an interesting tidbit that you read about in the discussion or that we talk about. You can reference it in the timeline, so perhaps we can get more information if we're interested, if other people are interested in reading. Think about the people, the moments, the pivotal moments, the movements, the tools, anything that adds to your comprehensive history, understanding of the history of design, or graphic design in particular, is fair game to be included in the timeline, okay? Again, we're doing this in the Google form, so that means that we all have access. You all have access to this, so we edit and notate as need be. So in many ways, this timeline is also a continuation of our discussion, because you can get to the timeline and look and say, oh, I'm going to add to the discussion by adding this that we talked about, or this information, or here's an image that correlates to that, or here is a link with a biography of that person that we talked about, right? So think about that. I'm going to show you the starter version of this. I have started it with my initial notations. You are to start from here. The one thing that is important for you to understand is every entry you enter, you must initial at the end with your initials, and you also must color code. So each of us is going to be color coded in the timeline, and you'll see when I open it what I mean. Right now, I am in yellow, so every entry that I've entered is going to be highlighted in yellow, so you know that I've entered it. It's going to look wildly creative by the end. It's going to be this really beautiful, massive timeline. And what we'll do at the end is to make a PDF and export it so that you have it and you can use it as see fit. It, just as a hint, there is a homework that's going to come down later in the weeks that you can use your particular individual entries in here as a basis to do that homework, just so you know. So think about that. And again, if you also think about each of your entries, if you were to separate each of your entries, you have this sort of timeline that is particular to you in terms of your understanding and your interest in design history. Each of you is responsible for no less than 25 posts. So you have a few weeks to do this. This is going to go for the next 5 weeks, so don't feel like you need to do everything right away. You're reacting to the conversations, the discussions, and the readings that we're doing. Got it? So once everything's going, you'll have access to this. So here is oops, and like I'm going to tell me that I'm signed out, which is not true, so bear with me. Let me sign back in here. So here's the timeline, right? So this is what the document looks like. Notice that everything's in yellow. That means it's me. Notice that pictures have popped up. Notice that I have a key here. So each of you can take one of these fields. Doesn't matter the numbers. Okay, we're just using sort of this like form as a grid. You can utilize it as you see fit. Just make sure you plug your name in here and you select the color. Easy to do. For example, you can type your name and then you can go up here and do a fill color and pick a color. Any of these colors. Could be custom. You can customize however you want to do it. Your call. But no two people have the same color. Everybody has to have a different color, just so you know. So, and after that, notice that on top, I started at 15,000 BC, and I start moving all the way till now, okay? And actually, I'm gonna put an entry here called now and beyond, right? So you can start putting things. You can add, for example, you can insert a column to the left or the right. You can insert rows below and above, depending on how you wanna do it. The structure of this is very loose, so you dictate it, right? When you add pictures, keep in mind that you may be adding a really large picture, just shrink them. You know, you can click it, drag the endpoint, shrink it up or down. And also notice that I've highlighted longer than the entry is just because I want the pictures to be part of my entry. If you have a picture, make sure that you do this so that the picture becomes part of your entry, right? And again, very loose structure. Notice how I'm just sort of like, you know, changing that because I don't know, I fill that in too much and I don't really want that. And really here it should be, there's no color in there, so it should be, oops, see, I'm just like doing a color. So sometimes I get stupid, there we go. Okay, right? So, you know, again, it's just a way for us to easily work collaboratively together. I'm gonna guess most of you probably have used Google Docs or Google Forms. This function is very similar to Excel. If you've used Excel before, Microsoft Excel. So you start to see that I added some like design history. I've added like like American Independence Day. I've added Picasso. I've added Marinetti, the futurist, the constructivism. I've added Dada and Duchamp, the Bauhaus, Martin Luther King. So it's not just design history. It could also be, again, history, significant moments. You do the entry, and notice how I say RT at the end because I signed it off. The call between the color and the signature, I will know. So, you know, this is really literally our timeline for this specific class, right? This is not a generic textbook. This is really as it pertains to us. So all your entries, again, are things that I want to see that interest you and that really start talking to you about design. One of the things that you could start doing, for example, also including yourself, I haven't included myself in here at all, which is funny. Ramon is born, right? So I can put myself here, for example, right? All right, so I've added myself, right? Because as a designer, I'm thinking, okay, I'm part of this narrative, right? So how do I add myself? And again, if you need to, here, right, you can move things, you can insert rows, columns, or I'm going to insert a column to the left, just so you can accommodate, okay? So be mindful of other people too as you do things. So if you have any questions, let me know, but this is just an introduction. But I'm looking forward to doing this and seeing how this grows. It's going to grow infinitely. It's going to be beautiful and amazing and interesting. And it's going to be a really good, document to have along with our discussions that we're having, both on video, on Google Hangout, and the discussions that show up on the discussion board. So between these three things, we're going to have this really fantastic discussion about design history and how we engage with it as designers now in thinking of what we're going to make or what we are making as designers right now. Great. So let's get going with this and see where you start. Remember that you don't have to do all 25 entries at once. I prefer you don't do that. Don't do that. and start reacting to the discussions and the readings and start plugging things in here. All right, looking forward to see what you guys do, and I'm very excited about this project. All right,